Hi everyone, I'm Heather from Grounded Approach, and today I'm just doing a really simple video on how to know if you have histamine intolerance. So this is a question I get a lot. I do a ton of videos on histamine intolerance. I primarily, almost exclusively work with people who have histamine intolerance. So people find my videos and then they always say like, well, how do I know if I have it? And so this video, we're gonna go over 10 signs and symptoms of histamine intolerance, and then how to really confirm that histamine intolerance is an issue you're working with. Okay, so let's get into it. 10 signs of histamine intolerance. These are the most common. If you have histamine intolerance, you probably have one, if not more of these. And they are inflammatory bowel disease. So that's like Crohn's and colitis. That is basically chronic diarrhea. It's really painful, lots of times blood. It's just a really difficult condition. And there's a huge overlap between Crohn's, colitis, and histamine intolerance. It is like 90% or more of people who have Crohn's or colitis also have histamine intolerance. So if that is you and you're in that camp, that's a really big sign. The second is migraines and headaches. Really, really common. Histamine intolerance causes that. So if you're prone to migraines or even if they're hormonal, reoccurring headaches, that's another sign. That is our issue that we worked with. My husband and I used to have chronic migraines pretty much every day for the first few years of our marriage. And so healing the gut with the GAPS diet and healing that histamine intolerance brought him so much incredible relief. And I'm so grateful for that. Okay, shortness of breath, that's another big one. Getting hives and other skin conditions like eczema or maybe psoriasis, itchy skin, just breaking out, feeling itchy, huge sign of histamine intolerance. A racing heart and anxiety kind of goes with the shortness of breath, but feeling really anxious, like you're tight, your chest is tight, that's a big sign. Hay fever and sinus problems. So if you're sensitive to like bee stings or insect bites, or every year you go out, in the spring and you like are basically dependent on antihistamines, that is a big sign that you have histamine intolerance. Duh. Food intolerances. So most people that I work with who have histamine intolerance have tons of food intolerances: dairy, gluten, eggs, nuts, you name it, they have it. And that is just another sign of histamine intolerance being primarily a gut issue. Okay, so number 8 is mental health issues. So I kind of listed anxiety, but depression, any mental health stuff can really be a sign of that histamine in your body, basically having too much histamine in your body. Insomnia and sleep disturbances. So with the mental health, the insomnia, and the sleep disturbances, one of the main things that histamine does in our body, it's actually something we need, and it serves basically your cognition. So if you have an overproduction of that or too much histamine in your histamine bucket, is what some people call histamine intolerance, you're gonna probably have mental health issues, insomnia, and sleep problems as well, depression, anxiety. And the last one is digestive pain. So IBD is pretty intense, like I said, bloody diarrhea, sometimes 10, 20 times a day, where digestive pain, that could just be constipation, bloating, irritable bowel syndrome. Not as intense, but still a digestive problem nonetheless. So those are the 10 signs of histamine intolerance. So if you have one of the 10, that's great. How do we confirm it? The best thing you can do is to go on a 10-day low histamine diet. Now, I do not recommend a low histamine diet long-term because it doesn't reverse or heal histamine intolerance, but it is really valuable as a tool to see if this is an issue you're dealing with. So to go on a low histamine diet, you have to avoid high histamine foods. That is going to be your fermented and aged foods: sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, kombucha, beer, wine, cheese, yogurt, all of that. Your vinegars, your dressings, chocolate, teas, green tea, black tea. Then there's a lot of high histamine fruits: papaya, pineapple, strawberries, spinach is one. So all of these are high histamine foods. Citrus. If you want to get an extensive list, you can find that online. But basically, you're going to want to remove all of these for 10 days. Now, another thing to keep in mind is leftovers. So you could have a low histamine meal of all these low histamine vegetables and fruits and whatever, but you cook it, not that you would cook fruit, but okay, you cook this low histamine, food, and then you put it in the fridge for 2 days and you have it 2 days later. Well, there is a bacteria that grows on your food over time when it's in the refrigerator or left out that really increases histamines. So even if you're having low histamine foods, but you cook them and then let them sit for a while, that could be really high histamine. So it's also important to avoid any of those leftovers. And I also want to say it's pretty important to make sure you're having low histamine meat during this time. So, in a lot of the Western countries like America and Australia, we dry age beef for 14 to 30 days. So, that is like going to increase the histamine a ton. If you go to the supermarket and you just buy chicken or beef or lamb that's been sitting in the refrigerated section for 4 days, it's going to have a ton of histamine. So, to keep your meats low histamine, you want to buy them frozen or very fresh. So, you can talk to your butcher and just say, hey, I have a histamine problem, so I need something that was either butchered and immediately frozen, or maybe was just butchered today and hasn't been sitting out for a long time. So to keep those meats low histamine, you're going to buy them and basically put them in the freezer until you need to cook them. You're not going to let your beef sit out in your fridge for 3 days before you cook it, because that's just going to make the histamine go up a ton as well. So if you're liking this video or finding it helpful, or you really think you have a histamine problem, subscribe to my channel because I have a ton of videos and I have a playlist specifically for histamine intolerance and how to heal it. Okay, so you have a few of these signs and you're willing to do a 10-day low histamine diet. How do you really confirm that histamine is an issue? Well, what we're looking for in those 10 days is a reduction of symptoms. We are not looking for a total elimination of symptoms. If you've seen any of my videos, you know that I fully believe that histamine intolerance is a gut issue. It is a full gut imbalance. So when you have a gut imbalance, you're also going to have sensitivities to other foods, probably. Maybe oxalates, maybe salicylates. Maybe you just have other foods that you react to, like rice. I don't know. It's bio-individual. But we're not removing every food that you could potentially be reacting to, because realistically, you're probably reacting to all of them if you have an imbalanced gut. But we're just looking for a reduction in symptoms. So if you feel 20, 30% better during that 10 days, that's a pretty good sign that you have histamine intolerance. Now, that's why I don't recommend doing the long-term low histamine diet, because it doesn't actually solve the problem. The problem is a leaky gut where foods are coming in, leaking into the inner parts of your gut lining, and it's causing your mast cells to release histamine. So doing a long-term low histamine diet doesn't solve the problem. In fact, I work with so many people who go on these low histamine diets and they just have to remove one food after another, because the reality is they're reacting to everything. It's been shown that food is only about 5% of our body's whole histamine content. The main problem is your body's overproducing histamine. It's really not the problem from the food. So if you remove all the histamine foods and you're still reacting, that's totally normal, but we're just looking for that reduction. So I really hope this video helps. And like I said, go check out my other videos if you have histamine intolerance.